The bay Mustang agonized among the rocks, the tide rising swiftly. Ethan Miller snorted in irritation. He had a $200 million deal to close, no time for nature's dramas. Until he saw the old wooden fence, half submerged in the sand. What he discovered there changed everything forever. Subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching from. Do you believe in second chances? The story is just beginning. Ethan Miller adjusted his platinum Rolex and watched the hotel manager sweat nervously in front of him. The man trembled, holding the envelope with the termination notice, knowing those words would end a 20-year career. "Mr. Miller, please, my family." Ethan didn't even lift his eyes from the folder. 40 employees laid off in one afternoon. Numbers. Just numbers on a spreadsheet that needed to adjust to new profit margins. Feelings didn't pay dividends. Compassion didn't build empires. At 57, he had learned that the world belonged to those who had the stomach to do what others considered cruel. The decision is made. Security. Escort this gentleman out. The office returned to silence. Through the window he saw the city's movement, ants scrambling for crumbs while he controlled the sugar bowl. Alone at the top, exactly as he had planned. No family to create expectations, no friends to demand explanations, no one to question his choices. The phone vibrated. It was Michael, his partner at the construction firm. "The helicopter is ready. Wild Horse Island, a 2-hour flight." Ethan picked up the folder with the contracts. 37,000 acres of wild paradise would be transformed into glass and concrete towers. Environmentalists would scream, locals would protest, but in the end, everyone had a price. They always did. The flight passed in silence until the turbulence began over the Atlantic. The pilot tried to skirt the storm, but the winds were impossible. Ethan clenched his fists as the helicopter began to descend forcibly. "I need to make an emergency landing, sir." The beach on Wild Horse Island appeared through the clouds, a strip of white sand surrounded by wild vegetation that would soon be torn out to make way for progress. The helicopter touched down violently, kicking up a cloud of sand. Ethan disembarked, annoyed, his Italian suit covered in dust. 3 hours lost until rescue arrived. 3 hours of profit evaporating as he stepped on that primitive sand. It was then that he heard the whinny. Among the black rocks battered by the waves, a bay horse was trapped, the tide rising rapidly around its hooves. The animal was wild. That was obvious from its unruly mane and wary gaze. It must have come from the herd that inhabited the island's interior, pursued by a predator or simply lost. Ethan looked at his Rolex. The tide would rise another 6 feet in the next hour. The horse would drown. Not my problem. He turned his back and walked toward the helicopter's wreckage. But something made him stop, a crescent-shaped scar on the animal's right hind leg, and those eyes, not pleading, but a fierce dignity even in the face of death. Ethan took off his expensive jacket and threw it on the sand, not for the horse's eyes, not out of compassion, but because a dead animal on the beach would be terrible publicity when environmentalists found out. Image problems cost more than Italian suits. He entered the cold water, the waves wetting his $600 pants. The horse recoiled, startled, but had nowhere to go. Ethan examined the rocks trapping the animal. He would need to use his bare hands to move the smaller stones and improvise a lever for the larger ones. 40 minutes later, bloody and exhausted, Ethan managed to open a passage. The horse hesitated, observed the strange man who smelled of power and greed, then galloped toward the dunes. Ethan stood there, water up to his knees, watching the animal disappear. Only then did he notice the old wooden fence, half buried in the sand. Pieces of an ancient structure, eaten away by time and sea spray. Something about that wood bothered him deeply, but he couldn't define what. Rescue arrived 2 hours later. Ethan boarded the reserve helicopter in silence, his ruined suit clinging to his body. The pilot avoided comments about the smell of horse and salt water emanating from his boss. During the flight back, Ethan tried to focus on the business numbers. 37,000 acres, 200 million in net profit, 5 residential towers, a luxury resort. But his thoughts kept returning to the dignified eyes of that bay horse. "Idiot," he muttered to himself. "Animals die in nature every day." In the office, Michael was waiting with the contracts. He looked his boss up and down, noticing the ruined clothes and scratches on his arms. "What on earth happened to you?" "Mechanical issue. Nothing that compromises the deal." Ethan tried to concentrate on the documents, but remained distracted. He picked up the phone and, without understanding why, called the veterinarian who cared for the horses at the ranch he'd sold years ago. "Dr. Harrison, I need some information. A wild horse with a crescent moon scar on its hoof. Is that common?" "Wild? On Wild Horse Island? Ethan, that region has one of the last free-roaming herds in the United States. Animals never domesticated, descendants of horses the colonizers abandoned centuries ago. A scar like that could be from birth or an accident. Why?" Ethan hung up without answering. He spent the rest of the afternoon trying to work, but made 3 errors in calculations he normally did in his head. That night, in his penthouse apartment, he stood on the balcony, watching the city lights. He grabbed his laptop and began researching Wild Horse Island. History, geography, local fauna. He didn't know what he was looking for until he found an article about the region's wild herds. Estimated population, 120 horses divided into 4 family groups. Territory, northeast coast, region known as the Bay of Winds. Bay of Winds. The name echoed in Ethan's mind like a distant bell. Bay of Winds. Where had he heard that before? He returned to the office at 2 in the morning. He rummaged through old files, family documents he had kept in a safe for decades, until he found the yellowed death certificate. Accident location, Bay of Winds, Wild Horse Island. His heart stopped. The date, March 15th, 2007. 18 years ago. Michael found him collapsed over the desk the next morning, surrounded by scattered papers and the certificate in his hands. "Ethan, what's going on?" He slowly rose, his face pale as paper. 18 years. For 18 years he had avoided any mention of that place, that date. And now he was about to destroy exactly the last piece of land that... Cancel the meeting with the investors. "What? Ethan, have you lost your mind? It's the biggest deal of our career." Ethan put the certificate in his jacket's inner pocket. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained firm. "I need to go back to the island. Today." "For what? Because of that helicopter accident?" Ethan didn't answer. He was watching the clouds forming over the ocean through the window. Clouds heading for an island where a wounded horse had touched something he thought was dead forever. "Michael, how much do you know about the Bay of Winds?" His partner frowned. "Only that it's where we want to build the main resort." "Why?" "Ethan, you're scaring me." Ethan grabbed his car keys. He had a helicopter to charter and a truth buried for almost 2 decades to unearth. The second flight to the island was different. Ethan brought vet equipment, water, food. He told himself it was just to protect the investment. Dead horses would cause environmental problems. He found the herd on the north coast, grazing near the dunes. The bay horse was among them, the crescent scar still visible. When Ethan approached, the animal raised its head but didn't flee. They observed each other for long minutes. "At least you're alive," he murmured. Ethan set up an improvised camp and began exploring the region. The Bay of Winds was about 2 miles away, a horseshoe-shaped cove where the waters formed dangerous whirlpools during tidal changes. It was there that he found the wreckage. Rusty pieces of metal half buried in the sand, fragments of a boat hull that time and waves had scattered along the beach. Ethan knelt and began digging with his bare hands. A corroded but still legible identification plate. St. Helens, Savannah, GA, his father's boat. Ethan fell to his knees in the sand. For 18 years, he had convinced himself that Frank Miller had died due to his own irresponsibility. A stubborn old man who insisted on sailing alone, ignoring weather forecasts, chasing romantic dreams about environmental preservation. But there was proof that Frank had reached the island. He had managed to sail 745 miles from Savannah. He hadn't died from incompetence. He had died trying to save precisely that region his son now planned to destroy. Ethan began digging frantically. He found a waterproof leather satchel, miraculously preserved. Inside, notebooks in his father's familiar handwriting. Pages and pages of notes on local fauna, water quality measurements, photographs of the wild horses. March 15th, 2007, last day on the island. I've catalogued the entire herd. There are 34 animals, including 3 foals born this year. One has a natural mark on its hoof, a perfect crescent moon. The locals call it the gift of the gods. If I can document their behavior for another week... The handwriting became shaky on the last pages. Ethan didn't answer my calls again. It's been 6 months since he spoke to me. Maybe he's right. Maybe I am just an old dreamer. But if he knew what was here, the beauty that's threatened, I'm sure he'd understand. My son was always smart. He just lost his way after his mother died. Ethan turned pages with trembling hands. Storm approaching. I need to leave tomorrow. I'll try one last time with Ethan when I get back. I'll show him the photos, the studies. I'll make him understand there are things more important than money. The last entry was unfinished. March 16th. Very strong wind. Boat engine failing. If anything happens to me, may someone continue the work. May someone protect the horses of the Bay of... Ethan closed the notebook. His eyes burned, but he couldn't cry. For 18 years, he had ignored all his father's attempts at reconciliation. For 18 years, he had turned pain into anger, longing into excessive ambition. Frank had died alone in that bay, trying to preserve a paradise that his own son would now destroy for greed. A whinny cut through his thoughts. The bay horse was a few feet away, watching him. The crescent scar gleamed under the afternoon sun. Gift of the gods, Ethan whispered. Then he understood. The horse he had saved was a direct descendant of the animals his father had studied. It was one of the foals mentioned in the diary. It was 18 years old, exactly the age Ethan had calculated. It wasn't a coincidence. It was Frank's last message. Ethan spent 3 days camping on the island, reading and rereading his father's diaries. Each page was a stab of regret. Frank wasn't the irresponsible dreamer he had imagined. He was a serious scientist, accurately documenting the region's unique ecosystem. In the last notebook he found unsent letters. My dearest Ethan, I know you're angry with me for not selling Grandpa's land when your mother got sick. I know you blame my stubbornness for the delay in her treatment. Perhaps you're right. But there's something here you need to see before it's too late. A beauty your mother loved, and that might reconnect us. Come to the island when you can. Just bring an open heart. Your loving father, Frank. Ethan folded the letter carefully. How many others had he never read? How many calls had he ignored? How many invitations had he declined? His cell phone rang. Michael, desperate. Ethan, the investors are furious. Where on earth are you? On the island. Doing what? The meeting is tomorrow. Ethan watched the bay horse graze peacefully near the camp. The animal had grown accustomed to his presence and no longer fled when he approached. Michael, how many years have we worked together? 15, why? In 15 years, have I ever asked you if you're happy? Silence on the other end of the line. Ethan, you're scaring me. Cancel the meeting. Cancel everything. Are you insane? It's 200 million. Ethan hung up. He sat on the sand and began making different calculations, not of profit but of loss. How many people had he hurt in the name of success? How many families had he destroyed? How many dreams had he trampled? The bay horse approached and sniffed his hand. Ethan remained still, letting the animal decide. Slowly, the horse rested its muzzle in his palm. "You know, don't you? You know who I am." Obviously, the horse couldn't know, but there was something in the way it watched him, an impossible familiarity that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. That night, he wrote his first letter in 2 decades. "Dad, I found your diaries. I found the horse you mentioned, the gift of the gods. He saved me in a way you would understand. For 18 years, I built an empire on your grave. I turned our pain into cruelty. I turned your absence into excessive greed. But now I understand what you were trying to show me. Forgive me for being too late. Ethan." He buried the letter in the sand where he had found the boat wreckage. The next morning, Michael arrived by helicopter with 2 security guards. "Ethan, enough playing around. You're coming back and signing these contracts." Ethan was brushing the bay horse with a soft branch. The horse remained calm, trusting. "The investors can sue the company. And they will. We're going to lose everything." Ethan turned slowly. His eyes held a peace Michael had never seen before. "Michael, for 15 years you've seen me make money, but have you ever seen me happy?" His partner hesitated. "That doesn't matter. Surviving matters." "Survive for what? To die alone as I was dying? To leave what inheritance? A concrete graveyard where there was once paradise." Ethan grabbed the folder with the contracts and threw it into the campfire. The flames consumed 200 million in seconds. "You've gone mad." "Maybe. Or maybe I've regained my sanity." Michael left, promising a legal battle. Ethan remained alone on the beach with the bay horse and the ghosts of the past. For the first time in 18 years, he slept peacefully. Ethan sold the penthouse apartment, the yacht, 3 luxury cars. Each sale was like taking an invisible chain off his shoulders. Michael sued the company for breach of contract. Investors demanded multi-million-dollar indemnities. The financial press crucified him in headlines, the tycoon who went mad. It no longer mattered. With the money from the sales, Ethan legally bought 37,000 acres of Wild Horse Island, not to destroy, but to preserve. He created a private reserve with a single building, a simple cabin where he could stay close to the horses. The bay horse, which he decided to call Frank, became his silent companion. He never tried to tame him. That would be a betrayal of his father's memory. But the animal chose to stay close, grazing in the cabin's yard during the day, running free with the herd at dusk. Ethan began mapping the families he had harmed over the years. The list was extensive and painful. The first was Mrs. Henderson, 73, evicted from her home to make way for a shopping mall. Ethan found her living in a rented room in a dangerous neighborhood. He brought her the deed to a new house in her name, mortgage-free, no strings attached. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, suspicious. "Because I can." "But why now?" Ethan observed the woman's wrinkled hands, identical to his own mother's. "Because someone taught me it's never too late to do things differently." Mrs. Henderson didn't smile. She didn't thank him. But she accepted the keys. The second family was more difficult. The Torres family had lost their small bakery when Ethan bought the entire block for real estate speculation. 3 years later, the father suffered a heart attack. The mother worked as a cleaner to support 2 children. Ethan sought them out one Saturday morning. He extended an envelope with the documents for a new, fully equipped bakery. "Is this a trick?" the woman asked. "No. What do you want in return?" "Nothing, just that you make the bread with your grandmother's recipe." She observed him for a long time before taking the envelope. "My husband died hating you." "I know. That doesn't change." "I know." Ethan visited 17 families in 6 months. Some forgave him, most didn't, but all received back what he had taken: homes, businesses, dignity. On the island, Frank watched each return as if he understood. The horse had gained weight, his coat shone. The crescent scar was now just a mark of character in a free life. One afternoon, while Ethan was mending the fence protecting the reserve, he received an unexpected call. "Dad!" Ethan almost dropped the hammer. 3 years without speaking to his daughter. "Sarah, I saw the article in the newspaper about the reserve, about the changes." Ethan sat on the sand. Frank grazed a few feet away, ears attentive as if he knew the importance of that moment. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked. "I'm trying to be. Can I visit you? I want to see the place. I want to understand." Ethan closed his eyes. When he opened them, Frank was by his side, those wise eyes fixed on his. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here, daughter. And yes, you can come. There's a lot I need to tell you." After he hung up, Ethan hugged the horse's neck. "Thank you, companion. I think he'd be proud." Frank whinnied softly as if agreeing. 2 years had passed. Ethan was now 59, his hair grayer, his hands calloused from honest work. Frank was 20, for a rescued wild horse, an advanced but still dignified age. His hooves were slower, but his eyes held the same serene wisdom. The Frank Miller Environmental Reserve now housed 180 wild horses, divided into 7 family groups. Researchers from 3 universities studied the animals' behavior. Eco-tourists visited monthly, learning about preservation. Ethan had built a small visitor center with his father's original diaries on display. On the main wall, a photo: Frank Miller hugging a foal with a crescent moon scar. "Is that the same horse?" a visitor asked. "The same," Ethan replied. "My father photographed him when he was 3 weeks old. Now he's 20 and the leader of the main herd." The truth was more complex. In recent months, Ethan had noticed Frank was frailer. The horse spent more time near the cabin, as if seeking company. Veterinarians confirmed what Ethan feared: arthritis in his legs, a tired heart. In the wild, Frank would have died years ago. Here, with discreet medical care, he had gained extra time. Sarah visited the island twice a year, always bringing the grandchildren. Ethan taught the children to observe the horses from a distance, to respect their freedom. "Grandpa, why doesn't Frank live inside like our dog?" asked Chloe, 6 years old. Ethan knelt beside his granddaughter. "Because he was born free, and freedom isn't something you keep inside, it's something you protect where it exists." Chloe waved to Frank, who was grazing nearby. The horse raised its head and watched her with gentle curiosity. "Is he happy, Grandpa?" Ethan looked at the silent companion who had transformed his life. "I think so. He did what he was born to do." That night, after Sarah and the children left, Ethan found a letter left by a visitor earlier. "Mr. Miller, I'm Robert Henderson, son of Carmen Henderson, the woman you helped 2 years ago. My mother passed away last month, cancer. But the last 2 years were the happiest of her life. She said she finally had a real home. I cannot forgive you for what you did before, but I can thank you for what you did afterward. My mother died in peace, in her own home, surrounded by love. That means something." Ethan folded the letter carefully. Frank approached and rested his head on his shoulder, a gesture he had repeated for 2 years, always in moments of greatest emotion. "You know, companion, your grandfather was right. It's not about being forgiven. It's about doing things differently," Frank snorted softly. "And you? Are you tired?" The horse remained there, motionless, sharing the night's silence. Ethan knew those moments were precious. Frank was aging. He himself was aging. But for the first time in 6 decades, he didn't fear the end. They had built something greater than both of them. The reserve would continue. The horses would remain free. The families helped would go on with their lives. Frank Miller Sr.'s work was finally completed. By the son who had learned, too late but still in time, that some treasures are not sold, some treasures are protected, and some treasures, like the friendship of a wild horse, choose us when we least deserve it and need it most. March 15th. 21 years since Frank Miller Sr.'s death. Ethan awoke in the cabin to find Frank standing at the door as if awaiting something special. The horse no longer galloped with the herd, his arthritic legs could barely manage long walks. But his presence remained majestic, dignified by age and wisdom. It was the day of the annual ceremony in his father's memory. 50 people gathered on the beach at the Bay of Winds. Researchers, reserve staff, families Ethan had helped, environmental authorities. Sarah came with her grandchildren, now teenagers, who spoke of the reserve with pride at school. Ethan spoke briefly, as always. My father believed that nature does not belong to us. We are merely temporary guardians. Today, 21 years later, this reserve protects over 200 wild horses and 12 threatened native species. But Frank Miller Sr.'s true legacy is not in the numbers. It is in the proof that it is never too late to choose to be better. After the ceremony, when everyone had left, Ethan walked slowly with Frank to the spot where he had found the boat wreckage. There, he had planted a tree that now offered generous shade. He sat under its canopy, Frank beside him. The horse breathed with difficulty. The veterinarian had warned it could be a matter of months. You know, companion, I've been thinking a lot about time lately. Frank turned his head, those eyes still attentive. 40 years I wasted being cruel. 20 years I tried to be better. If I could choose, I would obviously change the proportion. The wind blew softly, rustling the tree's leaves. But maybe it's not about lost time. Maybe it's just about time used. You taught me that. Ethan rested his hand on the horse's neck. I never managed to tame you. I never wanted to. You remained free and showed me what freedom truly means. It's not doing what you want. It's choosing to do what is right. Frank snorted softly, a sound Ethan had learned to interpret as agreement. A seagull landed near them. Frank watched it with curiosity, unafraid. The animal that had arrived wounded and distrustful now saw the world with serenity. When my time comes, I want to leave as you will leave, in peace, knowing that I lived with purpose in the years that truly mattered. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and red. Frank slowly stood and walked to the water's edge. Ethan followed him. There, where the waves touched the sand, they stood side by side. The 59-year-old tycoon who had learned humility and the 21-year-old wild horse who had taught compassion. Thank you, Frank, for everything. The horse whinnied one last time, a deep sound that echoed across the empty bay. Ethan watched the herd in the distance, running free under the infinite sky. Future generations of wild horses would grow up in that reserve. Children would visit the place and learn about respecting nature. Researchers would study animal behavior free from human interference. He couldn't go back and be the son he should have been, but he could be different today, and tomorrow, and every day he had left. Frank Miller Sr. believed in second chances. Frank, the horse, had given him his. Now it was his turn to pass that on. To every visitor to the reserve, to every family he helped, to every person who still believed in the possibility of starting over. Because contrary to what he had thought for 40 cruel years, it is never too late to choose to be human. This story is about regret, about words we didn't say, calls we didn't make, people we left behind while chasing things that don't matter. If you have someone you love but are distant from due to pride, anger, or being too busy, don't wait to need a wild horse to teach you what truly matters. Call, write, show up. Because unlike Ethan, you still have time. And if this story reminded you of someone, or if you believe in second chances, share it. We never know who needs to hear this today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.